A CEO walked into her office building at 6 a.m. and saw a black man cleaning the floors. Without asking a single question, she fired him on the spot. "You're too slow. Pack your things and leave," she said coldly. The cleaner didn't argue. He just quietly gathered his supplies. But as he walked toward the door, the CEO demanded to see his employee file. When she opened it and saw his last name, her face went completely white. The man she just fired? He was Thomas Blackwell, Jr., son of the company's founder and majority shareholder, the real owner of the entire building. And in the next 30 minutes, that CEO went from firing someone to begging to keep her own job. This story will show you why respect matters more than position, and why you should never judge someone based on their appearance or the work they do. Before we dive into this powerful story about karma and justice, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more stories where arrogance meets reality. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's see what happened. Victoria Sterling was 42 years old and had been CEO of Blackwell Industries for just 6 months. The company manufactured electronics and had 500 employees across 3 buildings. Victoria got the job through connections. Her husband was friends with some board members. From day one, Victoria ran the company with an iron fist. She believed in one thing: appearance. If you looked important, you were important. If you looked like regular staff, you didn't matter. She treated executives with respect but spoke down to janitors, security guards, and maintenance workers. Victoria came from wealth. She'd never cleaned a floor in her life, never struggled to pay rent, never understood what it meant to work a humble job. And she made sure everyone knew she was in charge. Thomas Blackwell, Jr., was 38 years old. His father, Thomas Blackwell, Sr., had founded Blackwell Industries 40 years ago, building it from a small repair shop into a multi-million-dollar company. When Thomas Sr. passed away 2 years ago, he left 60% of the company shares to his son, Thomas Jr., but Thomas Jr. was nothing like his father in appearance. He was quiet, humble, and believed in understanding every part of the business from the ground up. After his father died, Thomas Jr. made a decision. He would work undercover in his own company for 1 year, starting from the lowest positions. For the past 6 months, Thomas had been working as a night janitor. He wore simple clothes, arrived early, stayed late, and cleaned floors alongside the regular staff. None of the new employees knew who he was. He wanted to see how the company really operated when the owner wasn't watching. He'd seen a lot in those 6 months. He saw which managers treated staff well and which ones didn't. He saw inefficiencies and problems that never made it into official reports. And he'd been watching Victoria Sterling very carefully. It was Tuesday, 6 a.m. Thomas was finishing his cleaning shift in the executive wing. He had worked through the night and was mopping the hallway floors near Victoria's office. Victoria usually arrived at 8:30 a.m., but today she came in early for an emergency board meeting at 7 a.m. She stepped out of the elevator in her expensive suit and designer heels, carrying her leather briefcase. When she saw Thomas mopping the floor, she stopped. She'd seen him before, one of the cleaning staff, but never paid attention. Today, something about seeing him triggered her anger. Maybe she was stressed about the board meeting. Maybe she was looking for someone to take her frustration out on. "You," she called out sharply. Thomas looked up. "Yes, ma'am. Why are these floors still wet at 6 a.m.? You should have finished hours ago." Thomas spoke calmly. "I'm finishing now, ma'am. I'll be done in 10 minutes. Victoria walked closer, her heels clicking on the wet floor. 10 minutes? I have a meeting in an hour. This is unacceptable. What's your name?" "Thomas, ma'am." "Well, Thomas, you're too slow. We don't pay people to take all night to mop a hallway." She looked him up and down with disgust. "How long have you worked here?" 6 months, ma'am." 6 months and you still can't clean a floor efficiently? You're fired, effective immediately. Leave your supplies with security and get out." Thomas stood there for a moment, mop in hand, looking at Victoria calmly. He'd expected something like this eventually. Victoria had a reputation among the staff for being harsh, but he'd never personally experienced it until now. "Ma'am, can I ask what I did wrong specifically?" Thomas said quietly. "What you did wrong?" Victoria's voice rose. "You're here at 6 a.m. still cleaning. That means you're either lazy or incompetent. Either way, this company has no room for people like you." A security guard, Mike, had been walking by and heard the commotion. He stopped, looking uncomfortable. Mike had worked with Thomas for months and knew him as a kind, hardworking man. "Miss Sterling," Mike started, "Thomas is actually one of our best." "I didn't ask for your opinion," Victoria snapped at Mike. "You're security, not HR. Thomas, I said you're fired. Do you understand English?" Thomas took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for, not because he wanted to be fired, but because this was exactly the kind of behavior he needed to see firsthand. How would Victoria treat someone she thought had no power? "I understand, ma'am," Thomas said. "I'll need to get my employee file from HR to process my termination." "Fine, go to HR. Just get out of my sight." Thomas walked downstairs to the HR office, still in his janitor uniform. Mike, the security guard, followed him. "Thomas, I'm so sorry," Mike said. "She had no right to talk to you like that. You're the best cleaner we have. You always stay late, help everyone, never complain." "It's okay, Mike," Thomas said with a small smile. "Don't worry about it." At the HR office, Sarah Chen, the HR director, was just arriving. She was 50 years old and had worked for Blackwell Industries for 15 years, since before Thomas S.R. passed away. "Thomas," Sarah said, confused, "what are you doing here so early?" "Miss Sterling just fired me," Thomas said simply. "I need my employee file." Sarah's face went pale. "She what? Why?" "She said I was too slow cleaning the floors." Sarah sat down hard in her chair. She knew exactly who Thomas was. Thomas S.R. had personally told her 2 years ago that his son would be working undercover. Sarah had been keeping Thomas's secret, managing his employment paperwork under a simple application with no mention of his real identity. "Thomas, I can't believe she," Sarah stammered. "It's fine, Sarah. Can I have my file, please, the complete one?" Sarah understood immediately. She went to a locked cabinet and pulled out Thomas's real file, the one that identified him as Thomas Blackwell, Jr., majority shareholder and true owner of the company. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Sarah asked quietly. "I think it's time," Thomas said. "Victoria needs to understand something about respect." While Thomas was in HR, Victoria was in her office preparing for the board meeting. She'd already forgotten about firing the janitor. It was nothing to her, just another employee who didn't meet her standards. Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the door. "Miss Sterling, the board members are arriving early. They want to meet in the conference room now." "Now, the meeting isn't until 7 o'clock, Victoria said, annoyed. "They said it's urgent." Victoria grabbed her files and headed to the conference room. When she opened the door, she saw 5 board members seated around the table, and Thomas Blackwell, Jr., sitting at the head of the table in his janitor uniform. Victoria stopped in the doorway, confused. "What is the janitor doing in here?" "Security." Thomas stood up calmly. "Miss Sterling, please close the door and sit down." "Excuse me." Victoria's face turned red. "I just fired you. You have no business being in this meeting. Get out before I call the police." One of the board members, Robert Hayes, an older gentleman who'd been with the company for 20 years, stood up. "Victoria, I suggest you sit down and listen." "Listen to a janitor." "Robert, what is going on?" Thomas spoke clearly and calmly. "Miss Sterling, my name is Thomas Blackwell, Jr. My father founded this company. I own 60% of the shares. For the past 6 months, I've been working undercover as a cleaner to understand how this company operates from the ground level." Victoria's briefcase slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a loud thud. Her face went from red to white in an instant. You're, she couldn't complete the sentence. "I'm the owner of this company," Thomas said, "and you just fired me for being too slow at mopping floors." Victoria stood frozen in the doorway. Her mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. The janitor she'd just humiliated was the owner, the real power behind everything. "Please sit down, Miss Sterling," Thomas said, gesturing to a chair. Victoria's legs felt weak. She stumbled to the nearest chair and sat down, her hands trembling. Thomas remained standing. "For 6 months, I've worked alongside the maintenance staff, the security team, the warehouse workers, people you walk past every day without acknowledgement. I've learned more about this company in those 6 months than I ever could from financial reports." He pulled out a notebook. "I've documented everything. The night manager in Building C who harasses female staff. The warehouse supervisor who's been stealing supplies. The safety violations in the production floor that haven't been reported. And most importantly, I've documented how our leadership treats our employees." Victoria tried to speak. "Mr. Blackwell, I didn't know." "You didn't know who I was," Thomas interrupted. "That's exactly the point. You treated me terribly because you thought I was just a cleaner, someone who didn't matter. Someone beneath you." Robert Hayes spoke up. "Victoria, we've received multiple complaints about your management style in the past 6 months. 18 employees have reported feeling disrespected or harassed by you. We've been investigating," Thomas continued. "This morning, you fired me without cause, without investigation, without even asking if there was a reason I was working late. Do you want to know why I was still cleaning at 6 a.m.? Victoria said nothing, her face pale. Because our night cleaner, Maria, called in sick. Her daughter has the flu. I stayed late to cover her shift so she wouldn't lose pay. That's why I was still mopping floors. Thomas opened a folder. Let me share some other things I learned while working undercover. Miss Sterling, do you know the names of any of our cleaning staff? Victoria stared at the table. Do you know the name of the security guard who opens the door for you every morning? Silence. Do you know that our warehouse staff hasn't received their promised bonuses for 3 months because you redirected those funds to redecorate your office? Victoria's eyes went wide. Those were operational funds. I had authorization. You had authorization to use discretionary operational funds. You chose to use money earmarked for employee bonuses to buy a $15,000 desk and a $8,000 chair. One of the board members, Linda Martinez, shook her head in disgust. Victoria, is this true? The office needed updating. It reflects the company's image. While our employees struggle with their bills, Thomas said quietly. Maria, the cleaner whose shift I covered today. She's a single mother of 3. That bonus would have paid for her daughter's medical treatment. Instead, you bought Italian leather chairs. Thomas sat down at the head of the table. Miss Sterling, I hired you 6 months ago based on recommendations from board members who knew your husband. I gave you a chance to lead this company with integrity. Instead, you've created a culture of fear and disrespect. Victoria finally found her voice. Mr. Blackwell, please, I made a mistake. If I had known who you were. If you had known who I was, you would have treated me with respect, Thomas finished. But that's exactly the problem. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's position or last name. Every person in this company, from the CEO to the newest cleaner, deserves to be treated with dignity. He looked at the board members. I'm calling for an immediate vote to terminate Victoria Sterling's employment as CEO, effective immediately for cause. The cause being a pattern of disrespectful conduct, misuse of company funds, and creating a hostile work environment. Robert Hayes nodded. I second the motion. The vote was unanimous. 5 board members, all in favor of termination. Thomas looked at Victoria. Miss Sterling, you're fired, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to clear your office. Security will escort you out. You will receive no severance package due to termination for cause. Victoria's carefully constructed world collapsed in that moment. She tried one last time. Please, I have a mortgage, expenses. I'll change, I'll do better. The same things our employees say when you fire them without warning, Thomas said quietly. You'll receive your final paycheck for hours worked as required by law. Nothing more? Victoria left the building in tears an hour later, carrying a box with her personal items. Employees who saw her leave whispered among themselves. Word had already spread through the building about what happened. Thomas called an all-staff meeting for that afternoon. 500 employees gathered in the main warehouse, everyone from executives to maintenance workers. Thomas stood on a platform, still wearing his janitor uniform. Most of you know me as Thomas, the night cleaner. Today you learned who I really am. I want to explain why I did this. He looked around at the faces, young and old, every ethnicity, every level of the company. My father built this company with his own hands. He started as a repairman, fixing electronics in a small shop. He never forgot where he came from. He always said, treat the janitor with the same respect you'd treat the CEO, because the janitor works just as hard. The crowd was silent, listening. I worked undercover for 6 months because I needed to see this company the way our employees see it. And I learned something important. Most of our managers and supervisors are good people who care about their teams. But we had a problem at the top, a CEO who believed that position equals worth. He paused. Victoria Sterling was fired today, not because she didn't know who I was, but because she didn't care who I was. She fired me because she saw a cleaner, and she decided a cleaner didn't deserve respect or fair treatment. Starting today, we're making changes, Thomas announced. First, all employee bonuses that were delayed are being paid immediately, with interest. Second, I'm creating an employee respect council. Workers from every level will have direct access to report problems without fear of retaliation. Applause broke out. Third, every manager and executive in this company will spend 1 week per year working in a different department. Yes, including cleaning, warehouse work, and maintenance. If you want to lead people, you need to understand their jobs. More applause, some people cheering. And finally, I'm establishing the Thomas Blackwell SR, Memorial Scholarship Fund. Any employee's child who wants to attend college will receive financial support from this company. Because my father believed that when we invest in our people, everyone rises together. The warehouse erupted in applause. People were standing, some wiping tears from their eyes. Maria, the single mother whose shift Thomas had covered, raised her hand. "Mr. Blackwell, can I say something?" "Of course, Maria." She stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "You covered my shift when my daughter was sick. You didn't have to do that. You're the owner, you could have just let it go. But you stayed all night to clean floors so I wouldn't lose money. That's the kind of leader we need." "Thank you." The applause was thunderous. Thomas smiled, genuinely moved. Later that week, Thomas gave an interview to a business magazine. The story of the CEO who fired the owner went viral, shared millions of times on social media. The reporter asked, "Some people are calling you a hero. What do you say to that?" Thomas shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I'm someone who believes in basic human decency. What I did working as a cleaner shouldn't be extraordinary. Every leader should understand what their employees experience." "What would you say to other CEOs and business owners?" "I'd say this. The people who clean your offices, who guard your buildings, who keep your operations running, they're not invisible. They have families, dreams, struggles, and dignity. How you treat them says everything about your character. Not your profit margins, not your quarterly reports, your character." "And what about Victoria Sterling? Any regrets about firing her?" "No regrets. Victoria made her choices. She chose to value appearance over substance, position over people. Those choices had consequences, but I hope she learns from this. I hope she understands that respect isn't optional, it's essential." The article ended with a powerful quote from Thomas. "My father used to say, you can tell everything about a person by how they treat those who can do nothing for them." Victoria Sterling failed that test. She's not the first, and she won't be the last. But in my company, that behavior ends now. 6 months after the incident, Blackwell Industries had transformed. Employee satisfaction scores went up 78%. Turnover dropped to record lows. Productivity increased. The Respect Council had resolved dozens of issues before they became major problems. Victoria Sterling took a job at a smaller company in a much lower position. According to people who knew her, the experience humbled her. She was quieter now, more careful about how she spoke to people. Maria's daughter recovered from her illness. Maria herself was promoted to evening shift supervisor with a significant raise. She sent Thomas a handwritten card. "You changed my life by seeing me as a person, not just an employee. I'll never forget that." Thomas eventually stopped working undercover, but he never stopped working alongside his staff. Once a month, he could be found in the warehouse, on the production floor, or yes, sometimes cleaning offices late at night. Because he believed leaders should never forget where real work happens. The final truth, this story spread across the business world as a reminder of what leadership really means. It's not about corner offices or expensive suits. It's not about power or control. Leadership is about respect, dignity, and understanding that every person, regardless of their job title, has value. Victoria Sterling learned a painful lesson. Never judge people by their appearance or position. Never assume that someone who does humble work is someone who doesn't matter. Because you never know who you're really talking to. And even if that cleaner isn't the secret owner, they still deserve your respect. As Thomas Blackwell, SR, used to say, character is what you do when you think nobody important is watching. Victoria thought nobody important was watching. She was wrong. If this story moved you or taught you something about respect and character, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. We share real stories about justice, karma, and treating people with dignity. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever been treated poorly because of your job? How did you handle it? Hit that notification bell so you never miss when someone learns that respect is earned, not demanded. Thanks for watching, and remember, how you treat people when they can't help you shows who you really are. See you in the next story.